Episode 1. Today's Did You Know number? 32%. That's the percentage of people who bought a home in 2024 that identified as first-time homebuyers. And welcome into First Time Keys Podcast. I'm your host, Adam McAllister. It is good to have you with us. If you haven't had the chance to yet, please hit the like and subscribe button so you can be notified of all the podcasts, all the episodes as they drop, and all the work that we are doing here at the First Time Keys Podcast. As we get this thing going, again, thank you so much for making this part of your listening, part of your viewing, and part of your day as you start researching and looking into, hey, I'm thinking about buying my first home, and I'm not sure where to start for information. I can tell you that this podcast is 100% dedicated to you. So we're not going to be hitting into real estate investing as far as like being an investor in real estate. We might hit on a little bit, but the goal is truly going to be going from, hey, I'm renting now and I want to buy my first home. So that is 100% the focus here, and just making you a smarter home buyer and giving you the right information you need as you get out there. Again, my name is Adam McAllister. I will be your host throughout the First Time Keys podcast, and I, again, want to welcome you in. It was a fun weekend. Kind of let you in behind the scenes. We celebrated my mom's 70th birthday over the weekend, which is kind of crazy because you start looking at, I remember as a kid, certain age numbers were like, that's old. As a kid, 30 was old. And then I blew past 30. And, I'm now a little over a year away from turning 50. And I thought 50 was ancient. And now 50 isn't quite so old. And my mom is 70, which is wild to think about it. Like the year she was born was the same year Velcro was invented. Get that? Velcro and my mom are the same age, which is just ludicrous. So happy birthday to her. And if you're celebrating your birthday here in January, happy birthday to you. So let's get things kicked off here. Let's get started. First topic I want to discuss, and again, we're going to go from the very basics to more intense learning. So this first episode today, we're going to be talking about, are you really ready to make a home, or should you be renting still? So the first question I want to pose to you is, how long do you plan on being in your first home? If you're really thinking about, hey, are we really ready? So the first question I really want you to think about is, how long do you plan on being in that first home? And the reason why I ask is because you're going to need, on average, 4 to 5 years just to break even on that home. So if you're planning out going, we've been renting now for a while, or we're living with mom and dad in the basement, or we're sharing some space with friends, and I want to get out there and start looking at my own place, answer that question. How long do you plan on being there? Because if it's going to be less than, I would say, 5 years, to be conservative, then you really should continue renting. The last couple of years, folks have kind of gotten into a abnormal area of unrealistic equity in their home. So once you buy a home, you've got the price that you paid for it, you've got the appraised value, and then anything above and beyond that is equity. That's money you can tap into for your home. And likewise, when you sell the home, that's the amount of money you can put in your pocket to put towards the next home, or put towards whatever. It's your money. It's your equity. You've earned it. Go ahead and use it the way you want to use it. But it normally takes, on average, 4 to 5 years. And it used to be longer than that, in order to gain enough equity, to have enough in the home that once you sold the home and you paid the commissions and you paid the taxes and you paid any other fees it took to get the home sold, that you'd actually have enough money that it made sense to sell the house and move on to the next one. We've had folks that, they buy a home and a life event could happen. It might be a divorce. It could be a job change. It might be a number of reasons that pop up. But how long are you planning on being there? Because if it's less than 5 years, you're likely looking at paying to get out of that home. That's right. Paying to get out of the house. You pay to get into the home. The last thing you want to do is pay to get back out. So really take a look at how long do I plan on being in this home? And is this an area that you plan on being in long term? And long term meaning longer than 5 years. In the city, in the town that you currently are living in, do you have the work and the ability for things in life to support you that you go, yeah, it makes sense that I'm going to be there long enough to be able to purchase a home, live there long enough that that home's going to pay me, that I'm not going to have to pay out when it's time to sell. And here's the deal. You could be looking at this saying, yeah, I plan on being in this home for 10, 15, 20 years. Hell, this is going to be my lifetime house. I'm never going to move. But life happens. So have a realistic look and a realistic conversation with yourself. And if there's someone else who would be going in on this home with you, a girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, friend, whatever, this is a serious conversation you want to be having with them and going, hey, how long do we plan on being here? And if it's less than 5 years, you probably want to consider finding a spot to rent instead of buying. Um, unless you are in a very weird market where home prices always go up. Now, that's sort of been the instance in our local market here in South Central PA since mid 2020. When we came out of COVID, it sort of set this unrealistic expectation, where folks were like, hey, we're buying a house. And then a year later, they're like, you know what? This wasn't the house. We're going to sell it. And normally in that situation, like we talked about, you're paying to get back out of it. And because of the unrealistic and the abnormal rise in home prices during that time, they actually put a little over $20,000 in their pocket in this one particular instance that I'm referencing. That's not normal. That's not the common situation that you're going to see, which is why I really wanted to start this episode and this conversation with you with have the time conversation. Because if it's going to be less than 5 years, you probably want to continue renting or find a great spot to rent, because you're just not going to build enough equity in that time. You're going to be looking at, does the property in our area, does it appreciate 3 to 4%, which is normal? Or do you live in an area that sees wild swings in property values? The Las Vegas, the California, the Florida markets. Some of those see extremely wild swings and a roller coaster of pricing that it could be at premium one day and the next day, because of a black swan event, the pricing of that home, the value of that real estate has dropped 30% or more. So know your area, because if you live in an area that's really not affected on the greater realm of news and price swings, then you might be able to get away with getting into a home and then being able to sell it 3, 4 years later. But I want you to go into this knowing that because you're buying a home doesn't mean you're automatically going to make money a year later or 2 years later or 3 or 4. Again, on average, you're going to want to be in that home at least 5 years to be able to make some equity, to be able to make some money off of that home when it's time to sell. So have that conversation and look at going with where we want to be, with where I want to be in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, in life, in career, in personal life, in social circles, is what I'm looking for to get me there. Am I going to have that in this current location? And if the answer is yes, then by all means, let's get started and let's begin the process of getting your first home. But if you're looking at this going, you know what? I'm here now and And in order for me to advance in my career, I'm more than likely going to have to move in like 2 years, maybe three. Then my recommendation to you is find a great rental, or maybe look at doing some property investing. There's different things you can do and still buy a home and be able to benefit you. We'll talk about those later, and you can find those in a lot of different areas. Just Google house hacking, and we'll address this in a future episode. There are things you can do and still buy a home that will make you money long term. But as far as the traditional buying a home, living in it, selling it, putting money in your pocket in order to move on to the next property, again, you're going to want some time there. So have that serious conversation. Look at where you're at. Look at where you want to be and the trajectory you want life to look like. And just know, hey, if it's going to be less than 5 years, maybe I keep renting. But if it's no, I'm in a solid relationship, or I'm in a solid spot personally and professionally, and I'm going to be in this area, this town, this geographical center of area, then it probably makes sense to move forward with buying a home and making the leap. So again, what's the length of time you plan on being in that first home? And if it's going to be shorter than 5 years, you might want to have that hard conversation of, do I just continue renting? Do I find a great rental and set up shop there? And then on the flip side, no, I'm probably going to be there at least 5 years. Then let's begin having the next conversation when it comes to finances and what this looks like. Again, this is the First Time Keys podcast. I am your host, Adam McAllister. Coming up, a new segment. Well, they're all new segments. This is a new podcast, but a segment we're going to call Tales from the House. Yes, this is real life stories that happen in real estate. And we're going to begin with one that happened to me during my very first year in real estate. This goes back to fall, November of 2012. Like any new agent, you're busy looking for your first transaction, looking to try to get started. And so you end up chasing anything that looks like it might turn into anything. And I always kind of laugh because people will sometimes go, "Oh, don't go into the city. The city's where scary things happen." And I'm always like, no, I've had more crazy shit happen to me out in the country than I've ever had in the city. So just as a reminder, doesn't matter where you live, where you're from, crazy things can happen at any time and anywhere. So this story begins with, the theme of this is getting a gun pulled on me. That's right, a gun pulled on me while in the process of real estating. How about that? So to properly set the scene, I had gotten a call one day about a sign that was up in front of someone's home that was a for sale by owner. Now, for sale by owners have their own special theme in the real estate world. This one particularly, though, came with some extracurricular. So this for sale by owner sign happened to be in the town that's known as Brogue. It's called Brogue here in York County, PA. Now, to give you the proper visual, if you're a Gen Xer, I want you to think of Dukes of Hazzard. If you are a millennial, I want you to think of Duck Dynasty. And if you're Gen Z, think Lainey Wilson, but not really the glittery bell bottoms, more like just came out of TJ Maxx on sale. More clearance section TJ Maxx. Like we're talking rural country area, which is right where I grew up, about 5 minutes away from where I was born and raised. So very familiar with the area. So I drove down one day and saw the sign out front, knocked on the door, and no one was home. Now, I had done enough door knocking and enough neighborhood visits at this time that I knew that neighbors love to talk about neighbors. And I thought, well, maybe if I knocked on the other neighbor's home, I could get a little bit more information to be dangerous. That way I could answer this person's question about the home that was next door. So I walked next door and begin knocking on that neighbor's door when all of a sudden I hear screeching tires behind me in their driveway and the sound of a shotgun cocking. That's right, the old. And then I hear someone go, Can I help you, boy? And I'm like, okay, this is not the visit I had planned for the day. And so I just simply turned around. I said, hi, yeah, I'm Adam McAllister, dropped the brokerage I was with at the time. And I said, I got a phone call about the house next door, um, that it was a for sale by owner, and they were curious about more information. As I'm walking up to the truck and the gun is slowly lowering itself into his lap in the truck that he was sitting in, and he proceeds to tell me, oh, well, that's my pappy's house. I'm like, oh, okay, great. Yeah, he was busy redoing things and now he's got it for sale. And I'm like, great. And proceeded to get some information only to find out that I could go meet his pappy up at the local convenience store where he basically held court Monday through Friday in the mid afternoons. So, again, in our crazy world, we never know what we're going to come up against. Just make sure you're doing everything to keep yourself protected. And obviously, when pursuing for sale by owners, always know that you never know what you're going to come up against. And that's today's Tales from the House. So, oh man, yeah, I'll never forget that day. Yeah, that was a crazy situation because that went from, wait a minute, do I need to start packing? And then when I met his dad up at the convenience store known as Rutter's here in York, man, the conversation we had, and you could tell he was used to doing business out in the country, and he had his own special way of doing business. So again, you never know all the great and interesting personalities you're going to meet in the real estate. So, all right, that brings us to this week's tip of the week. Your Uncle Adam's tip of the week is get pre-approved. Know your finances. We're going to be doing our very next episode about this. But before you go look at homes, before you do anything, we all know looking at homes on Zillow and looking at homes online, man, that's a lot of fun. There's no stress to that. But truly know your finances and talk to a lender, talk to a bank, talk to a financial institution that you trust, and get to know your finances and get pre-approved. There's nothing worse than going out and looking at homes that you absolutely love, only to find out that that home could be outside your price range and that you can't buy it. So it's like going after the person you've had a crush on, and you finally muster up the will, the determination, the motivation to ask them out, and they just flat out reject you. So get pre-approved, know your finances, and that is my tip of the week. Well, that's going to conclude episode number 1. Again, thank you so much for being part of today's episode. Don't forget, please hit the like and subscribe, and I will see you again in episode 2. This has been the First Time Keys podcast with your host, Adam McAllister.